Hi, everybody. Jeremy Plonk here from BET and Xpressbet alongside Scott Shapiro, welcoming you into the First Call podcast. We're not days away from the Kentucky Derby. It's down to hours. The countdown is on to Saturday's Run for the Roses. And then tomorrow, we will have the Kentucky Oaks. Now, typically, I start this show off, Scott, by saying TGIF. Thank God it's Friday, but we're doing this a day early for podcast purposes because of Oaks Day on Friday. And I'm not going to say TGIF this week, my friend. I'm going to say TGI Jeff. Our good friend Jeff Siegel is back in the first Kentucky Derby wager guide. He's been battling health issues since February, and we are going to lead off with the GOAT, Jeff Siegel, with his Kentucky Derby analysis. He's back on the podcast.
Hello, I'm Jeff Siegel, handicapper for First Bet. Looking forward to Saturday's Kentucky Derby, the 151st running of the first jewel in racing's Triple Crown. Mile and 1/4 on the main track for 3-year-olds. And in handicapping this race, I like journalism. I'm not apologetic about it. I know he's the favorite. It's a big field. There may not be a lot of wagering value at what he will be at post time, perhaps 3-1, 5-2, somewhere in that area. But I do think he's going to win. In fact, I'm trying to find something about him that I don't like. And everything is positive. He was beaten in his debut. He hasn't lost since. 4 consecutive wins, triple-digit buyers in his last 2. He has a pedigree that would suggest he'll love a 1.25 miles. Excellent tactical speed. And after winning the San Antonio Derby in style, he's done nothing but good in the morning. Take a look at this recent workout at Churchill Downs. You can see him breezing through the lane, never asked at all. Beautiful mover, very light on his feet, good acceleration. Looks like he's thriving for trainer Michael McCarthy. And I expect journalism to run the race of his life. And if he runs his best race, it should be good enough to win the Derby. How do we make money in this race? Well, maybe we can hook him up in exactas or trifectas with some price horses. How about a real bomb here in number 3, Final Gambit, 30-1 in the morning line. Now, I don't know whether he'll handle dirt or not. I don't know if he'll like the dirt in his face. I don't know who he's been beating, but he's a deep closing stretch runner in a race that could have a fast pace and set things up for the deep closers. And Final Gambit certainly has the pedigree to handle any surface. He's improving. His numbers are going in the right direction. He's unproven, but that's why he's 30-1. Yeah, you don't get price horses unless they have something that people don't like about him, and he has a lot to prove. But throw in number 3, Final Gambit. He could clunk up and get a piece of it. Also, if looking at this race, number 10, Grande, lightly raced, a nice colt here, trained by Todd Pletcher. Very good second in the Wood Memorial when the race shape was against him. He's only had the 3 starts. His numbers are rising with every start. He's another closer who could benefit from a fast pace. Toss in number 10, Grande, at 20-1 in the morning line. Then you've got a horse that seems very logical, and that's number 18, and that's Sovereignty. Now, he won a stakes at Churchill Downs. Around 2 turns as a 2-year-old, won the Street Sense. Was victimized, I think, by the track profile at Gulfstream Park. Not a real friendly track for the deep closers, and Sovereignty had a lot to do. Still finished well in that race to be second. And I do think at 1.25 miles at Churchill, a track I know he likes, that Sovereignty could make a very serious run late, especially if the pace situation comes up as fast as I think it will. So those are the 3 horses I'm going to hook up with journalism. You may want to just take the straight price at 5-2 or 3-1 in journalism. I think he's going to win, but if you want to expand your profits, take a look at those 3 horses I just mentioned, and you might be able to get a pretty good payoff on Saturday at Churchill Downs.
Go to news.first.com and click on the wager guide. Free access to the first Kentucky Derby wager guide, where you can get more from Jeff and all of our handicappers around the first team. Scott, I love you, but I had to let the GOAT have first call on this First Call podcast. He was the original co-host here. We hope to have Jeff back live on the podcast sometime in the future, but for now, having him back in the wager guide is absolutely fabulous. And the best news we've had in a long time is getting him back. And hey, I agree with him on the Derby pick too, so that's even better.
Exactly. Always good to get Jeff's stamp of approval. But long before I got into this industry, I had a lot of respect for Jeff. Absolutely don't mind taking a backseat to him at any point. Glad that he's feeling well enough to come around and share his thoughts with us. And they are, like you said, included in the wagering guide, along with our thoughts as well.
All right, great to have Jeff back. Let's talk about the stakes races we will handicap this week on the First Call podcast. It's all Kentucky Derby weekend. So we're going to start things off for the benefit of those of you on our traditional audio channels. Here are the list of races Scott and I will handicap over the next 40, 45 minutes or so. we'll go to Churchill Downs on Friday for the 151st running of the Kentucky Oaks. The main event, race number 11 on the card Friday. A lot of big stars in action on Friday, but the best gambling races, they come on Saturday, it seems like. Saturday, May 3rd, our lineup from Churchill Downs. We will start handicapping with race number 5, the Churchill Downs Distaff Turf Mile. We'll go to the 3-year-olds in the Pat Day Mile in race number 6. Skip ahead to race number 8 for the Churchill Downs Handicap for top sprinters. To the grass 3-year-olds in race number 9 for the American Turf. A sensational edition of the Derby City Distaff in race number 10 for the Filly and Mare sprinters. And then the traditional Turf Classic, the race right before the Kentucky Derby on the grass, race number 11. And Kentucky Derby 151 will wrap things up in race number 12. That's how we'll handicap them. That's how you'll like putting your tickets together throughout the course of the next few days. Scott, we talked about that Oaks Day card with a lot of superstars. You've got Torpedo Anna and company on the undercard. You've got some big names. You got Fierceness and Mindframe matching up in the Alley Sheba Stakes. But from a gambling standpoint, in the Kentucky Oaks, where we'll start to make our plays, it gets much better on Saturday than Friday from my perspective.
I agree. A lot of star power, as you mentioned. Now, that does often, present opportunities if you want to get creative and be contrarians. Particularly, I might consider doing so in the La Troyenne. But, in terms of the gambling, it's always a better card on Derby. It's Derby Day, of course. I think this year definitely leans heavily towards Derby being a far better card. And I think about 80 to 90% of that is just the quality of the Derby card.
And we talked about budgeting in our previous podcast. If you want to go back to last Friday's podcast in the archives, there's a lot on betting strategy and Scott and I's thoughts on how to budget your money for the day. So we're going to talk about handicapping and picking horses in this podcast. If you go back to last Friday's, you're going to get a lot about Derby and Oaks weekend strategies. So be sure to check out the archives as well. All right, let's talk about the Kentucky Oaks. Field of 14 was entered, but news today on Thursday as we record this podcast broke that number 8, 5G, will scratch. George Weaver not happy with the way she's training. So 13 will go in the Kentucky Oaks. There were no also eligibles to add into the field. Scott, the 6-5 morning line favorite is Good Cheer in here. She's never lost in 6 starts. She's got the Godolphin Blue. She's Brad Cox. That perfect record in Ledger makes you think she's going to be a big favorite. But people who are devotees to the speed figures think she's no faster than the others in here. What gives?
Well, Good Cheer had not overly impressed me given the price that she was and her resume before her last effort in the Fairgrounds Oaks, Jeremy. But I think she not only took a step forward that I like to see from the Thurgraph and from other figures as well, but I think she beat a really legitimate filly. And while the Kentucky Oaks is going to present by far the biggest test of her career, she beat one of the fillies that I think would have been amongst her biggest challenges had she decided to remain in the field, and that is the Vava's little sister. So I think Good Cheer really cemented herself. The confidence from Brad Cox. I've seen Brad a lot talk about his horses over the years being in Kentucky and, talk to him a lot. He seems very confident in this one, and I think she's going to get the right trip mid-pack with Louis Saez aboard. So to me, Good Cheer is too tough to take on in here, even though I wish I was a little more creative.
Yeah, look, 6-5 in the morning line is the short price on her, but those ones add up, right? And people see those ones in the program. She's been 2-5. She's been 1-20. She's been 3-5. She's been 3-5. She's been 3-5. She's been 6-5. 6-5 would be the co-highest price she's ever gone off. So I know a lot of people are saying she's not 6-5, running a bunch of high 80s and a 91 buyer last time against this field. But the ones are the ones, and the public are going to be drawn to them. I will not be surprised at all if she's 6-5. So I think the line is pretty close. I think it's closer to correct than incorrect than others are claiming. Now, do you think she's vulnerable? This workout's awfully good. She's going to gallop out well here for Brad Cox. She's by Medaglia d'Oro, who's already sired a couple of Oaks winners. Plum Pretty, you might remember her from years back. And then, of course, the great Rachel Alexandra, the most famous of the offspring of Medaglia d'Oro. She's out of Wedding Toast. I mean, this is a regal pedigree here. If she had run 5-6 points faster in her buyer figures, everybody would be saying 6-5 might look like a gift instead of 3-5. So if there are alternatives to her, who do we start with?
Well, I think you got to analyze the pace. And with the 5G scratch this morning, it potentially takes some of the speed out. I personally thought there would be pretty quick to honest pace in here. You got Simply Joking on the inside. You've got Lacar's doing all of her best racing on the front end in the middle. You've got, and then you've got Anna's Promise and Quiet Side, and you had 5G. I think this takes a little bit of the gas out of the race, may change the tactics even of some. I think Simply Joking is very interesting here as an underneath option. I think she's very talented. She's done very little wrong herself. She lost the quiet side, but she did so when she was coming off a little bit of a layoff because she was scratched out of the previous prep at Fairgrounds, the Rachel Alexandra.
Right.
Whip Beckman has had a few fillies that are high caliber. He's always talked highest of this filly. And I think the inside, so far, we'll see, there's going to be some weather, but so far the inside and speed has been favorable over the first few days of the Churchill Downs spring meeting.
Yeah, in terms of the weather forecast, it looks worse for Friday than Saturday at this point, with some updated forecasts that are circulating around there now. Reasonable chance we do get some rain on Friday. Saturday's looking like maybe more in the morning and not necessarily around the Derby, but we always get that downpour somewhere between the national anthem and my old Kentucky home. It pours like hell on Derby Day, so we really don't know the Derby track condition until it's post time. Ballerina d'Oro is one who's kind of interesting in here for me on the Oaks. She's kind of my alternate in here. She's going to be coming from a little bit farther off the pace, but she's so well bred too, out of In the Moonlight and by Medaglia d'Oro. We talked about his success with the fillies. She's Chad Brown and Flavian Pratt teaming up here. Look, she was very workmanlike. I don't like the visuals on her. This is more of a horse I kind of like in general, not necessarily wowing me like when I watch her on video, but I think the race could set up for her decently in here. I think you're going to get a fair price. I like the pedigree, and with the connections, Pratt and Brown at a fair number, I'm willing to take that shot that maybe if the favorite isn't up to the test in Good Cheer, if she runs the first misstep of her career, that maybe it could be Ballerina d'Oro at a decent price. She was 3-5 last time. She didn't visually impress in the Gazelle. She was all out to win that one, but I'm hoping Chad's got her a little bit tighter for this one than maybe the tune-up.
No, she's the other one. I did put out a article regarding the Exactathon promotion, and included in that is a recommendation of mine, or how I'm going to strongly consider, in fact, playing the Oaks and Exactas. And Ballerina d'Oro is my other underneath. I think under the first scenario, maybe Simply Joking, the pace isn't as honest. Ballerina d'Oro pace is contentious. And to your point, that last race wasn't, what we wanted to see at 3-5, lugging in a little.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Chad say this. You get Pratt, which is always a good thing. I think the benefit of the field stretching out versus that compact group, it was a really good trip from my perspective, but knowing the filly probably matters a lot. So I think she's got a big shot to put in a late run if the pace is contentious.
If you like the 11 Good Cheer in here, you still got a 13-horse field, good trifecta and super opportunities in here. Scott talked about maybe just two real big pace plays in here in Simply Joking, and also the other one in here being the 7 Lucara. So maybe something along the lines of the favorite 11 with the 2-7. One of the speeds holds for second. Then maybe you can get Champagne or Ballerina d'Oro to close from off the pace for third, and maybe kind of attack a pretty focused trifecta in here. I don't think you want to be throwing a bunch of alls around if you like the 6-5 on top, right? If you like somebody else to win the Kentucky Oaks, then you can kind of play around with the alls, and if you want to throw Good Cheer out altogether. But if you like Good Cheer on top here, I think you want to stay focused in the tries and supers at that kind of number in a field of 13. Derby's a little different animal with 20 potential entrants in that field and a favorite who's going to be a higher price. But I think tries and supers, you want to stay pretty darn focused here if you're playing in the Kentucky Oaks and you like Good Cheer. Okay, let's go from Friday's race, the Lilies for the fillies, to our card on Saturday at Churchill Downs, where it's Kentucky Derby 151 day. And again, stakes races start earlier in the day with the Knicks Go. First post, 11 or 11:30 a.m. for the first run on 11 a.m. on Derby and Oaks Day. So first post 11 a.m. Stakes get started, I believe, in the Knicks Go in race number 4. We're going to start our handicapping in race number 5. It is the Churchill Downs Distaff Turf Mile, grade 2 in here. And Distaff Turf Mile, a race where Tepin kind of tipped her hand years ago as a super filly. This was kind of her breakout race. I remember that year Tepin was working in company with a Mark Cassey trainee who was headed towards the Kentucky Derby, something Moon. I can't remember the first thing. It was the 5 horse, and it had Moon in the name for Cassey, if memory serves me right. But Tepin had been outworking him in the morning leading up to the Derby. And so one of the reasons you like to watch these Derby workouts is sometimes the workmates that they have with some of these star horses have to be good enough to run with the Derby horses. And Tepin kind of tipped her hand that she was really a promising up-and-coming type, and she delivered in the Distaff Turf Mile in her big, coming out race.
Yeah, I think she was 8-1 in that race. I think about
good number.
Yeah, and she was kind of a buzz horse, though, for the reasons you mentioned. And I didn't remember the actual reason, but this is a race with not a ton of speed in it this year, with a 1 mile excursion over the turf. I think the obvious likeliest winner is Special Juan, who's the 5-2 favorite, coming off the win from just off the pace, sitting off a pretty aggressive speed horse in the Honey Fox. Now you have Luis Saez back, not a lot of speed outside draw. I think she's the likeliest winner, but I'm not willing to swallow that price. So I went to number 5, 5 Towns, who didn't have a great trip last time, first off the bench in the in Sanibel Springs at Gulfstream Park, while the winner, moving on up, who's also in this race, had a perfect trip. And I'm hoping second off the bench with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, going to get a much better trip in here. And I think the price will be right to make this kind of a key horse and obviously throw some win money on.
Well, let's go back and check out the last race for 5 Towns, as you mentioned, in action against Moving On Up. They get the rematch at Churchill Downs, but here they were at Gulfstream.
They stack, they pack, they turn for home. Who do you like here as they straighten for the drive? On the outside, it's 5 Towns from the rail, moving on up. And between horses, it's In Our Time. Be My Sunshine is next. Moving on up is taking the lead. Breath Away just stopped in traffic. Moving on up, got the trip. It's Moving on Up and Edgar Zayas for Safi Joseph Jr. to win the Sand Springs by 3 conclusive lengths.
Now, if you're going to go to Florida in the wintertime for your winner of this Churchill Downs Turf Mile, you would think Chad Brown. He's got to have something here, right? He's won this race 5 times the last 4 years. All 5 times he's won this race has been with 5-year-olds, some veterans. He's got a couple 5-year-olds in here to consider. The one Valencia coming out of the races at Tampa Bay Downs. And then number 7, Tax Implications, also a 5-year-old for Brown, who hasn't run since running in that Honey Fox Stakes against Special Juan. Couldn't run with Special Juan down at Gulfstream, but that was a different course. Brown hasn't been a big fan of the Gulfstream turf in recent years and has run a lot of his better turf horses, it seems like, at Tampa in the winter. I would think of the Chad Browns in here. Tax Implications might get bet harder because Flavian Pratt's riding, but I kind of like Valencia a little bit better of the Chads in here, and I think you're going to get a better price. So Saffron Moon's the filly she's chased in her last 2, another Chad Brown stablemate, and those were going longer. I think she'll be sharp going a mile with a big rally. The race and pace will be sharper, and I think she's going to have a good turn of foot. I give Valencia a shot in here.
I don't think that's a crazy thought at all. I agree. I prefer her to the Pratt Klaravich Tax Implications, and I definitely agree with your point about the Tampa. I think it's clear Saffron Moon will be running in the Modesty, however they say that, on Friday. So maybe you can get a little bit of a gauge there. But that's one of the better ones, I think, to an extent. Probably want a little more ground, but Valencia definitely worth consideration to come from off the pace.
Let's go to the Pat Day Mile next up on the program. The Pat Day Mile, Grade 2, 1 mile. This used to be run as the Derby Trial the week before the Kentucky Derby, and they'd run it 7 days out, the 1-turn mile race. They renamed it for Pat Day, brought it to the Kentucky Derby undercard several years back, and now it's become kind of like the consolation prize on the Kentucky Derby Trail for some, and then also it's kind of like the grand finale of the spring for the sprint type. So you get a good intersection of runners in here, either talented 1-turn horses or horses that just weren't quite up to the Derby distance. And we've got a good mix of that again in this field. You got horses like Madaket Road and Built and California Burrito, all in major preps for the Kentucky Derby right from the inside. A Gaming for Bob Baffert didn't extend and go far enough to become a Derby horse with enough success. So he's turning back. Innovator, another one turning back. Amongst the sprinters in here, though, Gate the Wire, probably one of the more traditional sprint types entered in this field. Smoking Wicked from Louisiana for Dallas Stewart. So you kind of got a little bit of a clash of distances in the Pat Day Mile. It's like this every year. How do you see it shaking out, Scott?
Well, I mean, some years I think the class from the runners that are, dropping out of those Grade 1 high-level Derby preps with the best 3-year-olds are the attractive options. I like one of them, but I don't like Madaket Road at the price. Maybe he's capable. Maybe the cutback will work. But I kind of always thought he's a 2-turn horse. I mean, they rode him aggressively in his last couple of races. Is he going to be ridden aggressively going shorter here? I don't necessarily know that that's a plan that's going to work for him. But I did go to another one of those on top. Oh, and to speak to Gaming, he got a pretty decent number on the comeback race at Oaklawn. But it was a very underwhelming visual performance. So maybe he ran good enough and got it what Bob wanted out of the race. But at his price, I'm willing to take him on as well. I think I'm going to make Built my key horse and top pick in here, Jeremy. Son of Hard Spun was another one on the Derby Trail down in Louisiana. Don't love that he danced a lot of dances, but to your point, I'm hopeful this is the last stop for him before a break, and that the cutback and the trip, which I think both should be beneficial, will be better kind of than the ones he's gotten when he's gone too far. He was up a little too close to the pace in the Louisiana Derby to stick around, maybe from a race shape perspective. So if Built is not too tired from the campaign, I think he's going to get the right trip and has the class to beat the Bobs. I think the Bobs are vulnerable here.
All right, here is Built in action at a distance a little bit closer to what we're going to see, the mile and the 16th Gun Runner.
These 2-year-olds head for home here at the fairgrounds after 3/4 for Built in 1 minute 13.77 seconds. And Built has builded up a big lead coming down toward the final 16th. And Built has the kick. Magnitude chased Built throughout. Render Judgment is third. And Built just steamed away from him in the Gun Runner. Won by 7. Magnitude was second. Render.
Now, Magnitude would come out of that race and run a big one a little bit later in the campaign in the Risen Stars. So Built, one of those horses who's taken on good competition. We'll see how he stacks up with these middle distance horses at a mile. This is a good time to remind you that right now, open for wagering is Preakness Future Wagering. And the Pate Mile horses, historically, you can see a horse out of this race end up in the Middle Jewel and the Triple Crown in a couple weeks. A couple of these individual entrants are listed amongst the 40 wagering interests in the Preakness Future Wager. You can bet the Preakness Future Wager up until Saturday afternoon prior to the start of the Kentucky Derby. So be sure to look at the Preakness Futures. There might be some odds that you like there. You will get to see the Pate Mile before the Preakness Futures close. So from a gambling standpoint, this might be kind of an important race if you're looking at those Preakness Futures, because you'll know how these horses perform and who might be moving forward towards the Preakness Stakes out of this race, if there are anyone. You could either make a bet or pull your bet back from that. But again, with the Kentucky Derby, you won't know the outcome before the pool closes for the Preakness Future Wager.
Worked last year, right? The winner of this race won the Preakness 2 weeks later.
That's right. He's the Gray, right?
He's the Gray, yeah. So I know I didn't like the horse in the Pate Mile. Well, I liked him a little in the Pate Mile. I used him. Definitely didn't like him in the Preakness. So definitely something, good advice there to consider both the fact that they will run and that you can use that information to your advantage in the future pool.
Yeah, and in that future, there is an all-other 3-year-olds option. So there might be a horse in the Pate Mile who's not amongst the individual interest. If they run well in there, you'd be like, hey, maybe I can get some value out of the all-others in this particular spot. So keep that in mind as you look at the Preakness Future Wagers. Again, they are open now and closing through Saturday. I've got a little nugget on Citizen Bull that's got me a little bit interested in that Preakness Future before we get too far. Horses who have drawn the rail in the Kentucky Derby in recent years have an uncanny knack of coming back and winning Triple Crown races, either the Preakness or the Belmont after rough trips in the Kentucky Derby. There have been several of them. I mean, you think of the Modonagals, you think of who was it a couple of years ago? They were looking at Lucky, came back obviously in 2010. But there's been 4 or 5 of them from the rail that have come back to either win Dornick last year from the rail in the Derby, came back to win the Belmont. So if things don't go right for Citizen Bull on this Saturday, maybe in 3 weeks' time, he'll have a better Saturday if you're looking ahead to those Preakness Future Wagers. Enough about that, though. We've got now wagers to talk about on Saturday. So let's get back to the now. The Churchill Downs Handicap, race number 8 on the card, 7 furlong sprint here. And this is a great group, Scott. This is a very, very, not just a great group, but an interesting group, because you've got some like really top sprinters that we haven't seen against each other. So it's kind of like one of those basketball tournaments, you know, where everybody in one of the regionals is like teams you haven't seen against each other yet. And you're really excited to see how they match up. Banishing has been like out of this world at Oaklawn this spring. I have no idea how he stacks up against these kind. Bookham Dano was a great 3-year-old sprinter last year. How does he stack up with the older sprint ranks? Extra Anejo got back on the beam with a huge win, the best he's run in years last time out at Keeneland. And then you've got the real stars in this race. You've got Mindframe, you've got Nisos, and you got Mulligan. There are just a lot of really intriguing, interesting ways to look at this year's Churchill Downs Stakes.
Without question, and from a spectator's perspective, a fan's perspective, maybe one of the more attractive non-derby races on Saturday. Mm-hmm. From a wagering perspective, I really struggled with this race because when I looked at it, to your point, you're bringing in horses that you really don't know how they stack up against each other. Banishing, cutting back to 7 furlongs off of beating Lesser, but doing it almost every week, it seems like. Yeah. He's coming back off short rest. Then you've got the real wild card in Nisos. I mean, if this horse is anything like he was, he should roll this field. But is this a prep for, 2-turn races or the Met Mile, perhaps? You got Mindframe, who's fast. I struggle with whether he wants to win races, but I don't think he's an absolute toss. So I struggled from a gambling perspective, and I think it's important to kind of take a stand in this race if you're playing horizontals, because you use all the logicals and you're getting 1 to 5 if Nisos wins, So
Right.
I got a little creative, and it might be a little bit of a reach, but when you can get the Brad Cox barn on Derby Day at a good price, like we're going to get with Giant Mischief, with a horse that I still think maybe has his best to offer, I think it might be worth taking. He ran a good second last out in the Whitmore, and while we've been raving, about the quality of this field, Booth would fit tremendously in here for Steve Asmussen. In fact, I'd probably like his chances quite a bit. Coming in, I think he's legitimate. For Steve, who obviously is very capable with sprinters. This one wasn't able to get to that one. But other than that, it's been in good form. And again, I just think the price is right for a horse that's never been worse than second at Churchill, albeit in 2 starts.
Yeah, he was 5-2, Giant Mischief, the horse you're talking about, against Booth last time in the Whitmore. So he's going to be a much bigger number this time. One of the reasons he's going to be a bigger number, and all the horses in this race might be a bigger number, is kind of the aura that is Nisos. We haven't seen him since February of last year. The Bob Baffert trainee won the Bob Lewis by 7. He won the Bob Hope by 9. He won his debut by 10. It's been a long time since we've seen him, so let's go back to the future maybe with Nisos here.
Has led throughout. Nisos let loose with a huge bid on the outside, though, at the 3/16. Nisos blows by the competition and turns it on. Wind me up in a battle for second with Scatify. Nisos passing the 2-turn test beautifully, geared down to stroll in by 7 lengths. Wind me.
Who knows how good he could be. At that point in time last February, he was the heavy favorite for the Kentucky Derby, but ineligible to do so because of Bob Baffert's ban at Churchill Downs, and he wasn't moved to a different barn by the time that the Triple Crown nominees were out. So everybody was talking last year in February like, wow, the best horse in America is not going to be able to run in the Kentucky Derby. What a shame. And he hasn't been to the races since. So now we fast forward, and it's been, 15 months, 16 months since we've seen him. I don't know what we get out of Nisos on the return. Flavian Pratt will have the call as he did in his last 2 stakes wins. He's got a nice post being outside, I think, for a horse like him in a 7-furlong sprint with a long run to the only turn. This is a lot of horses who were good. I don't know if they are good. That's the real question. Mulligan had a really good last year, but we haven't seen him since the Cigar Mile and the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Mindframe was good last year. We've only seen him once this year in the Gulfstream Park Mile, where he was okay, but he wasn't overwhelming at 1 to 10. I kind of went with the things you know, not the things you thought you knew. And I'm going to take a shot in here with Banishing. He's just really good right now. I don't know if he's 7/8 of a mile good, but he's run some fast races at Oaklawn. He's gone 6 and 10 and change. 9 and change. 7/8 might hit him okay. His last couple have been around 2 turns, but they've been against good horses. He took first mission to the wire last time out running Skippy Longstocking. He runs every couple weeks. He just ran 2 weeks ago, but I know he's good right now. You get Jose Ortiz, and I think you're going to get a big number. I don't think a lot of people are going to be backing Banishing him. Whether you're talking this race or really more in the maiden and allowance races on Oaks and Derby Day, the Oaklawn horses have been so good to me over the years. We talked about this on our gambling podcast last week. Overlay prices on the Oaklawn horses seem to abound on Derby days here as people get kind of caught up in the Keeneland runners, the California runners, and a lot of the big name barns. Banishing here at a price for me is interesting, but I respect the hell out of Nisos, Mulligan, Mindframe, your pick, Giant Mischief. I kind of did like you did. I'm trying to get away from the 3 obvious because the 3 obvious all have like major, questions at shorter prices.
Without question. And I mean, you got to ask yourself, it's been a while. This move used to be Bob Baffert. If I saw Bob running Nisos in this spot, I assumed he couldn't not be fit, but it's been a while since those moves have worked to the success that they used to. Obviously, he hasn't been here at Derby Day, and he's had a ton of success elsewhere. But, it's kind of he's going to have to be really fit, Nisos, to win, and he's probably going to be, 2 to 1? So yeah, it was a tough race for me to get real creative in, but as like you, I tried.
The one thing about the Baffert deal, let's talk about that just for a second. It's a touchy subject, obviously, right? I mean, there's only so much you can say and can't say about it, but he hasn't been back to the Derby in over 3 years, right? Since the DQ in 2021 of Medina Spirit. How much stock are we going to put into how his horses run on the undercard races? He's got a handful of starters, through Oaks and Derby Day before we get to the Kentucky Derby. Think what you want about Baffert and know what you know about his past results and what happened in Kentucky. If he starts out with a couple duds, what does that make you kind of raise an eyebrow and a red flag towards his Derby horses? Or if his undercard horses all come back and are firing like a shot, does that make you want to jump in a little bit more with Rodriguez or Citizen Bull? Do you take any stock on how the other horses run, or are they completely separate to you?
I think I will in this rare case, or maybe not rare case. I do like to follow hot barns, maybe not on the biggest days, but we've seen Bob win in spurts. I mean, I think back to Met Mile Day when More Spirit, capped off. Well, that was Belmont Day, but the Met Mile, More Spirit was amongst many Bobs that put in career best efforts. We've seen that a number of times. So yes, I am going to keep an eye on it. He had one vet scratched on Tuesday. The first one he was supposed to run in a maiden race, I believe it was, maybe an allowance. But it's definitely something I'm going to keep an eye on. And I'm not going to assume that he's going to be able to roll in here and do what he used to do, just like, without thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. I think that's realistic. People can read and listen into that what they want, but I'm with you in that. I've got to kind of play a little wait and see. I mean, is it Bob of 2021 or is Bob of 2024 different arriving at Churchill Downs? Because we saw a run from 2015 to 2021 unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, when you talk about from American Pharaoh to Justified to Authentic to Medina Spirit. I mean, that run, the 6-year run with 4 Derby wins, just unprecedented. Even Lucas at the height of his power in the late 80s into the mid 90s, just unreal success. And can that be replicated? I mean, are we handicapping the Bob Baffert horses, or are we handicapping the ghost of Bob Baffert? Right? I mean, it's like, are we thinking like it is still 2021? It's going to be interesting to see, because Baffert did start this year. I know we're off on a Baffert tangent, but this is kind of one of the first real signs. Like, what does Nisos do? But is he a fair horse to like gauge it against when he hasn't run in 15, 16 months? So there's just a lot of uncertainty with this race, the Churchill Downs handicap, and the Bob Baffert aura picture, however you want to say it, in general, coming back to the Kentucky Derby. I know this. A lot of people are celebrating his return. I don't quite understand that. Just a personal aside to that. I mean, he ran afoul with the rules and he's back now. Okay, that's fine. You've done your time and you're back, but I don't see any reason to celebrate the return of Bob Baffert from, what transpired not only in the Derby in 2021, but the Oaks with Gamine in 2020 in the situation that went on there. So, he's back. Let's see, as a handicapper and as a gambler, what we do with him. That's really my biggest concern, not as much as the fandom. Let's go to the American Turf.
I mean, it just, I'm glad the best horses are back at Churchill Downs, and a lot of the time, he has some of those. So that's what I'm celebrating, but I totally agree otherwise.
All right, let's go to the American Turf next up here as we switch gears back to the grass. American Turf for the 3-year-olds, mile and a 16th. A couple Derby horses were kind of thrown around as potential American Turf horses, but ended up in the Kentucky Derby. I think Flying Mohawk, probably the most talked about one there that could have went into this grass race. But we've got a field of 14 with 4 also eligibles. A very popular race in the entry box here for race number 9, the American Turf. I ended up with the European in here, New Century, a good post draw. Brendan Walsh had a fantastic Keeneland meet. He tied for the meet title for leading trainer with Brad Cox, which just doesn't even make sense when you think about the size of their barns and the typical results at Keeneland. So Brendan Walsh's barn is going absolutely crazy right now, coming back on 17 days rest. So Walsh hasn't done much training with New Century. So keep that in mind. This horse is under Brendan Walsh's name, but he gets Irad Ortiz. It seems pretty live with a good post position in a race where I just think there's like a million options in here. So I'm going to play the hot hand with Walsh. Irad with a good post. And this horse's maiden breaker was second off the layoff, has the second off the layoff form cycle repeating here. So those are my reasons for number 3, New Century, but I want to get a little bit of a price.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. I think he's a 3-1 morning line
Yeah.
favorite in here. But maybe we'll get a little bit of float because, as you mentioned, I think this race is wide open. And I think if you look back at a lot of the years, but particularly the last couple, a lot of us have been knocked out in the horizontals in this race. I know a friend of our name, Dustin, and I have talked about this a lot over the last few months. We're going to get through this year. But 47-1 Tricari last year, or Trickery, however we say that, and then 20-1, 22-1 Web Slinger on the outside the year before. I'm going to hope to spring a big upset here with one of the many that I will be using in some sort of wagers, and that's number 1 Warlander, who I just don't think is exposed at this point. I don't necessarily know if some of the preps that we saw, the Transylvania particularly, which I think we're going to take a look at in a moment, but I don't know if that was the best race. And a lot of the horses are coming out of there. Warlander, last race, first level allowance at Keeneland, obviously on paper, a much lesser race, but those races can be competitive, very competitive, and produce stars at Keeneland. And he was caught extremely wide throughout, an absolute line through it. Took some money a little bit in the race. It fell apart that race. And I think he's really never run that poorly. His effort in the Bourbon was solid. And again, he's just going to be a huge price for a barn that I think will have this horse prime for his best.
And I mentioned the second off the layoff form cycle. You've got the same thing with Warlander, and you look at his form, career debut, ran third, second start of the form cycles when he broke his maiden and got his 1 victory. So he's hitting the same spot of the form cycle as New Century, and similar handicapping angles there where you think you got a horse who can finish is going to save ground under a good finishing rider in Rosario. So we're kind of on same horses, but you're getting a much better price. So you completely talked me off of the 3. And the history that you mentioned is kind of, like long shots in this race and how tough it is to get through. I always try to say, like, this has always been my gig. For 18 years, I did stats and trends for the TV shows on the Triple Crown broadcast and all the undercards and that, like, you're trying to put common sense to why the numbers are, you just don't want to say something like, okay, favorites are 0 for 10 in this race if there's no reason why favorites are 0 for 10. Is that just a coincidence? But when you think about this race, it's 3-year-olds on the turf at Churchill Downs. Look at the field size. Everybody in the world wants to jump in here because it's a big pot. They're running for $1 million. The best 3-year-olds are not 3-year-old turfers. All good 3-year-olds are put on the Derby trail, right? So you kind of get like a little bit of a mixed bag. And maybe this is a revert back to we couldn't become a dirt horse. Now we come back and we're going to admit we're turf horses. Or you had a good 2-year-old turf horse. And there's not a lot of great spots to run with a 3-year-old turfer in the spring. I mean, Keeneland just opened with the Transylvania. There's not a lot of big races. Gulfstream, okay. There's some decent races at Gulfstream in the spring. Santa Anita, there's not a lot of big races. Fairgrounds, not a lot of big races for 3-year-old turfers. So we don't know this division at all right now. Right. And some of them are default horses to this division. And now it starts to make sense why bombs have won this race a little bit, because nobody really knows what you have. Everybody's willing to take a shot because, hey, there's no world beater. Nobody has established themselves as the world beater in the 3-year-old turf division by May any year. And that's why you can get a race like this that gets a little kooky in the results. I mean, it kind of adds up a little bit. So accepting a small price in here, sure, there are going to be favorites who win from time to time and shorter prices along the way. But fishing is not a bad expedition, when you think about what you'd mentioned with the prices in here and your experience of remembering this race as being the buster in the multis over the years. Tells me you better spread on your tickets in race number 9 Saturday, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, just a real quick piggybacks before we move on. I mean, I think it also, it looks as if this Transylvania and these stakes races are so much better. But remember, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, at this point are still moving up very quickly. Sometimes the stakes races are equal to or not even as good as the allowance races, just based on the timing of them. So those horses are always going to be overlays in races like this.
Many of the horses in the Transylvania are back. Let's give you a chance to see that race. Whenever it's a blanket finish, sometimes finding the fresh pace is the way to go.
Me Boggo leading Clock Tower by a length around the far turn. Maui Strong is third back toward the inside, a quarter mile to go. Test Score is next outside of Chasing Liberty, still 5 from the front. And Me Boggo is still the one to catch as Maui Strong looks to the rail. Clock Tower to the outside, now Chasing Liberty coming, then Test Score, followed by Reagan's Wit, still 7 lengths away. Scipio 7 from the front. Test Score comes forward. Maui Strong to the inside. Maui Strong, Test Score, then Chasing Liberty. Scipio on the extreme outside. It is Test Score in front for Manny Franco, and Test Score has won the Transylvania.
9-1 upset in there. We'll see what kind of price you get if you back Test Score back in there. But Warlander, top choice for Scott. I have been shamed out of taking the 3-1 running line favorite, and I'm happily shamed out of that one. I'm back searching for something in the American Turf race number 9. Now to the 10th we go. It's the Derby City Distaff, 7 furlongs. This race could be masked at the top and just write Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint over it, and you wouldn't think much of it, right? I mean, this race looks like the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint could look come the end of the year. You've got Scylla, you got Copian, you've got Hall and Ice, who's in excellent form right now, coming out of Arkansas. Mystic Lake, Vava, Ways and Means, Emery, Darth Vader, a major winner. Positano Sunset just won last time out in the Grade 1. Madison at 14-1. It is going to be a bigger price than that after winning the Grade 1 probably. And then you got Hope Road, a Bob Baffert speedster to the outside in the 12 hole. There's 14 in here, including a couple also eligibles. This is a great field, Scott. Like, you talk about, like, you may not find something you like in, say, the American Turf. Like, I'm not quite sure who I like for negative reasons. This is a race where you have good options. I always write good options at the top of my past performance when it's a race like this, where there are 5-6 horses who could win because they're good, not because of default picks.
This is very true. Very fun race. And one of the horses that you always got to consider at Churchill is Scylla, who's 4 for 4 there, but was scratched out of the Madison due to a fever and has never been on the inside. So just wanted to throw that out there. Not a horse. I'm going to let this one beat me. You mentioned, I think there are very high qualified fillies and mares in here, and a lot of them will show up in the Breeders' Cup. Are they at the top of their game? Are they Grade 1 caliber? Or are they kind of those also rans? Well, I really don't think Copian is an also ran. I think the daughter of Omaha Beach is at the top of her game, unlike maybe a horse like Valo, who won the race last year, but did so off a race before it and hasn't been the same. Or Ways and Means, who just always gets bet and has a lot of talent and maybe is as good as people think she is, but we maybe don't know that. But Copian, to me, has done nothing wrong, especially at one turn in her career. We saw her in the Santa Monica last time. Dust Hope Road, who, as you mentioned, is in here as well. And Richard Mandela is not an aggressive trainer when it comes to placing his horses, particularly out of town. When he sends horses to a Grade 1 race and they go, he'll back out late at times. We've seen that in the past, or they'll get injured or whatever for whatever. Copian is making the trip. She's there, and I think she's a pretty serious filly. So Copian, to me, might be a little bit better than the rest of these talented fillies and mares.
In front at the top of the stretch, Hope Road will try to counter in second. Then it's Ricci and Splendor at 3/16 to go. And Copian gets the upper hand on Hope Road with a furlong left to go, putting 2 lengths on her. Then it's Ricci in third. And Copian passes the 16th pole in complete command. The La Brea Santa Monica double to Copian. Very talented. Wins by 4 widening lengths.
I know people are going to look at that video and say another 4-horse field in Southern California, big deal, but Ricci can run, who was in there. Hope Road can run. We've obviously seen her form. And Copian, look, maybe you don't get as many challenges in a 4-horse field, obviously, as this 14-horse field. So maybe she's got to kind of, stiff arm a few more competitors in order to make the trip that she's used to getting. But she's fast. She's always right up near the pace, but not a need the lead type. She's going to go cooking out of there because you've got Scylla, kind of a little bit more of maybe a mile and a 16th type filly. She's not going to be dead speed on the rail, especially with Rosario. So Copian's going to come busting out of there. I don't think Benedetta's that fast. Awesome Treat that fast. You might get a pressure from Hall and Ice in the 5 post, but I think Copian's going. I think she's going to go from the rail, and we're going to see how this race shakes out. She is 3 for 3 at 7/8 of a mile. This will be her first trip outside of Southern California. She's won at Del Mar. She's won at Santa Anita, so she hasn't been only on one surface in her career. But this will be her first big road test. Scylla's never lost at Churchill Downs, but like you mentioned, there is some uncertainty with her, not only the distance, but because she did miss that Madison Stakes last time out with the fever. A lot of speed perhaps in here with Hall and Ice, with Mystic Lake. Hope Road to the outside, but Hope Road, I don't know. Will she go cooking from the 12? What do you think Juan Hernandez is going to do here on Hope Road from the outside? Do you think they're going to just try to start crossing over everybody, or is this one going to be a little more patient?
When Bob travels east, his horses send, right? I mean, if they are possible to send and they get out of the gate, they're going. I mean, I don't remember thinking Authentic was going to be in the lead in that odd September Derby, and then I paid the price for that. So yeah,
I'm with you.
I
I'm
think
with
she's
you on Copian in here. I'm hoping Vava has a little bit of a bounce back effort. She's run well here at Churchill. She too is undefeated at Churchill. Like Scylla, both 4-for-4 lifetime over this track. She wasn't the same filly towards the end of the year though, getting beat in the Ballerina and the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. She's one who obviously needed some time off at that point, and she was put away for the winter. This is a tough spot to come back with not having run since November for her. Cherie DeVos coming off a bad Keeneland meet for her. She had a lot of horses bet. I think she ended up somewhere in the one for low 20s, maybe 21, 22. Didn't have the biggest meet for her. So Vava and Irad Ortiz, I like the record over the track. I think this horse is a pure 7 furlong runner. Maybe she can be part of the exactive with the speed in here because she can finish, but she's got something to prove in here. She's working well. What do you make of her chances? Can she get back to that form that won this last year?
I think she's going to get bet off that 6-1 morning line. So that's part of the equation here because she's 4-for-4. She's the known commodity. She won the race last year. My concerns are two. One, she won this race last year, but she put in a lesser race in the Madison. She finished second, but it was significantly slower from a speed figure perspective to get to that big effort last year in the Derby City Distaff. Clearly, Cherie out of the Chad Brown school of training, she wanted to get a race in before this race.
Yeah.
To me, maybe they decided that this isn't the goal and this is the starting point, and they're pointing her to Saratoga, where they also point to, her being her husband, David Ngordo, and her Cherie. But I think she might be a fade in here, but a scary one at that.
This race feels a lot like the other 7 furlong sprint, the Churchill Downs Handicapping. Like a lot of the big names, Scylla, you've got Vava, and you've got Hope Road, but the Ways and Means, the other Chad, all making their first start of the year. You've got Copian, who's coming east for the first time. There's some question marks in here. I went to banishing in the Churchill Downs, and if I take that same strategy of just give me the horse, Mr. Right Now, it's Positano Sunset at 14-1, just won the Madison, running really well. Career best effort last time out. Third start off the layoff, deeper into the form cycle now for an Ian Wilkes Barn who's trying to have a career day on Saturday. When he has Burnham Square in the Kentucky Derby. Positano Sunset's going to be at least the same 14-1 price. I think the horse is going to get completely overlooked against this field. I don't know. Maybe that's the upsetter in there. I didn't originally have him tabbed on top. I've got her kind of amongst in my pick 4, pick 5 plays. I'm definitely using her, but I might be bold enough to put her on top before it's all said and done for the same kind of reasons. Like all the other ones have some serious question marks. We know what she's going to do, and there's going to be some pace in there. So if a horse like Copian gets beat, it's because they went too fast early, I think. And if they go too fast early, then Positano Sunset's got a chance.
That makes sense to me. And again, when you're looking at races and you're looking at logicals and their upside is great, but their downside is obvious as well. That's when you want to shop around probably to look for some better options. And this is the kind of day where it's just not worth swallowing a short price when you have questions, whether it be Nisos, whether it be Scylla, whether it be Torpedo Anna on Friday. If you have questions, take your shot. You'll have plenty of time to bet favorites the rest of the year.
All right, let's move now to race number 11 on the card. It's the Old Forester Bourbon Turf Classic. Been named for every whiskey in Kentucky over the years. It was the early times way back in the day. If you're old like me and Scott, you remember when it was the early times. I think Brown Foreman bought out all those whiskeys, and they all got different names over the course of the years. But it is now the Old Forester Bourbon Turf Classic. Grade 1, $1 million here. The race before the Kentucky Derby. I was doing a little research for the Xpressbet race of the week. I was writing up, Scott. The handle on this race is absolutely through the freaking roof. Like this is bigger than the Travers. Like you can't believe it, but more money is bet on this race than the Travers. I mean, every Breeders' Cup race except the Classic has a smaller handle than the Turf Classic. All eyes are on Churchill Downs for about 6:57 p.m. and an hour before that, when everybody's getting the buzz and the build up nationally and all the bets in for the Derby. Here sits this classic turf race that's just on the card every year, basically since they put the turf course in the 80s at Churchill Downs. And there's going to be a huge pot in this race, and we got a huge field of 12. So this is good gambling. This is Breeders' Cup level gambling in this race.
It is. And I guess kind of, we've been praising the quality of these races, and this is a great gambling race. I think it's fair to say whoever wins, I will not consider, this is not a grade 1 turf.
Correct. I agree with that.
This is a great grade 3 or a solid, probably grade 2, but you know, we can get past that because of the competition and how wide open it is. And you know, again, able to poke some holes at some of the likelier runners to take public support. You know, I took a big swing in here as well. I don't think, to that point, that the runners with a lot of experience that we know what we're going to get from kind of at this point in their career are world beaters. I don't even think any of them are necessarily sitting on, you know, their best races. I think, you know, so that combination makes me want to look to somebody that maybe is on the come a little. Okay. I'm hopeful that's number 8 Cameo Performance, who 7 races. This will be the second start of his 4-year-old campaign, so plenty of upside. You already spoke about Brendan Walsh and how hot he's been coming in from that Keeneland meet. And I think this one, you know, the Muniz Memorial was not a great race like many of the preps for this, but it was dominated, and it was a weird course because I'd rather be blessed who's in here is a zillion to one in there, kind of a wide field. I thought this was the horse that easily made the strongest effort. You know, I mean, I guess you could make the case for Spirit of St. Louis as well, but given the price, it came home. We like talking about the late pace ratings on Briz, solid 97, and against kind of the flow of the race, off the bench. I think it sets him up for a big effort here, whether it's good enough to compete with these types of horses. You know, me, you, Brendan, and Luis will all find out. But I think at 20 to 1 on the line, I think this horse is worth a swing.
Why not a price? We saw that Muniz Memorial. You talked about the winner in there at a gazillion to 1. I'd rather be blessed. It was actually 86 to 1, 15 to 1, and 14 to 1 underneath in the try. Let's go back and take a look at the big balloons of the Mervyn Muniz Memorial at Fairgrounds on Louisiana Derby Day.
I'd rather be blessed in 1 minute 14.55 seconds. A long odds leader. I'd rather be blessed turns for home with a quarter of a mile to go. Hagen's boat has been in close proximity to the pace. Gigante is right there trying to muster a rally with the rail. On the outside is Spirit of St. Louis, redistricting battles between horses. Johnny's Fireball did not ignite with 1 furlong to go. And here comes Spirit of St. Louis. Hagen's boat is right there. I'd rather be blessed is determined today. It's I'd rather be blessed at 86 to 1. Will it be? I'd rather be blessed holding on for a shocker from Gigante. Cameo Performance.
We get another shocker in the Turf Classic. Scott hopes so with the price play in there. I'm a little bit more chalky here, I guess. Integration, I don't think he's going to be the favorite in this race, but I think he's going to be no worse than second or third choice. He'll be back. He comes off a second place finish at 3 to 1 in the Maker's Mark Mile. It was raced too sharp for him. I took a shot with him to beat Carl Spackler in that race. That didn't work out as well when he was a well-beaten second in there, but Carl Spackler, one of the absolute world-class turf milers in American racing right now. So back to a mile and an eighth. I think the distance will suit this one. I gave Integration the top shot in here. You get the rail. Frankie Dettori didn't have a great Keeneland meet. He's not riding at the top of his level, but I gave Integration the shot in here. But again, not that creative. The other ones in here, I thought Running B might be worth a little bit of consideration off the win at Tampa Bay Downs for Chad Brown and Flavian Pratt. But I'm not wildly creative in this particular spot, and I probably should be more creative. Spirit of St. Louis is a horse who was beaten favorite in that Muniz when he ran fourth. He won the Pegasus World Cup Turf prior to that. I don't know about him. He just feels a little bit more like a top of ground horse. When he gets a hard turf course like at Saratoga down at Gulfstream in the winter there, I think a turf course with a little more give to it, like I expect we're going to have at Churchill Downs, doesn't necessarily suit Spirit of St. Louis. So I'm going to be against him, who I think is going to be the favorite. But the two I came up with weren't all that creative.
Yeah, Integration makes a lot of sense. We spoke about the Maker's Mark Mile on here last time before it went off, and I thought at the time and said it that he needs more ground, and I thought he ran well. The lone concern I have with him is he does appear to run well best fresh. You see it almost needing some time off, and I think his best efforts are when he has a little more time off. But maybe you could make the case that it's encouraging that he's able to put back-to-back races together in succession, because he really hasn't done that recently.
All right, now let's turn our attention to the big one. There's only an hour and 10 minutes between that turf race and the Kentucky Derby. So let's get handicapping for race number 12 on Saturday at Churchill Downs. Nobody calls it race 12. It's Derby if you live in Kentucky. It's the Derby if you don't live in Kentucky. Only the locals call it Derby. Everybody else, the Derby. And we will handicap.
It's getting used to, right?
What's that?
It took getting used to for me when I got there and nobody said the in front of it.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's definitely a cultural difference once you're inside the border of the Commonwealth. Who do we have for this year's Kentucky Derby? Well, 21 of them entered as of now. There are no scratches. There's a lot of rumors swirling around who could be in, who could be out. But as of the taping of our podcast, 12:15 right now on the East Coast in live time, as we record, we'll run this back here shortly. So as of early afternoon on Thursday, there are no scratches yet to the Kentucky Derby. They have until 9 a.m. on Friday for any scratches for the also eligible Baeza to get into the race. There could be scratches after that point, but a scratch has to be announced by 9 a.m. Friday in order for Baeza to draw into the field. Scott, he would be a significant addition to the field, but he was second best last time out to Journalism. Journalism, the 3-1 morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby. We already saw Jeff Siegel's pick of Journalism earlier in the program. Here he was on the track in his one and only workout at Churchill Downs. This is a horse who I thought had to show a little something in the morning after the Santa Anita Derby. It was obvious from a visual standpoint and a number standpoint how brilliant he was in the San Felipe 2 starts back. So when he ran in the Santa Anita Derby, and it was a lot tougher of a race, the situation of the race was a little more demanding on him, with Barnes leaning all over him on the far turn. He didn't win with quite the pizzazz and aplomb that he did in the previous start. It was fair to wonder, is he on the south side of his very best? So the works have to kind of tell you that he's going to come back to it. I liked what I saw in Southern California in his big drill there. This maintenance move at Churchill Downs was very good. Everybody who's observed him at Churchill Downs has been impressed with him. I think he still remains the horse to beat. Jeff says so. What say you?
Yeah, we're going to piggyback on. I mean, in Jeff we trust. No, honestly, we long before we heard Jeff. But yeah, I've seen nothing, since he's gotten to Kentucky to change my mind on this horse. And, to your point, I learned a lot about him at Santa Anita in the Santa Anita Derby. And while, we've heard speed figures weren't as good, it wasn't as brilliant, he overcame adversity in a way that you sometimes have to do in the Derby to get the victory. And he showed that he could, deal with that adversity and then still finish, which is a huge sign of a 3-year-old with a good mind. And we know how solid he is as a physical specimen. Journalism, to me, the first favorite, morning line favorite I'm going to pick in the Kentucky Derby in a while, but I'm doing so with a lot of confidence.
Oh, he's my first favorite I'm picking on Dobson's fierceness. That did not work out very well. So we are looking to rebound from that. But no, look, I'm a big fan of Journalism. I've been a fan of him since the year. He's been my number 1 ranked horse since January, the first Friday in January when I do the Countdown to the Crown scouting report. So there's a little loyalty there probably. So I've got to couch that. And I don't say that to brag that I had him on top back then. I say that to put it in perspective of I'm locked into him, and I'm trying to find a reason not to be locked into him, and I'm not finding it. So therefore, I'm with him all the way through. I did go back, and each week in Countdown, I do detailed trip notes on all the major prep races. And I went back, and last night I'm putting it all together for the final picks and report that'll come out later today. And I went back and looked at my notes again for the San Felipe. They did the same damn thing to him on the clubhouse turn of the San Felipe. 2 Baffords tried to pin him in on the first turn there. So everybody remembers the incident with Barnes on the far turn of the Santa Anita Derby because it was so obvious. They did the exact same thing to him on the first turn in the San Felipe. The beautiful thing of it was he broke really sharp in the San Felipe, and then the horse, the Bafford horse just cut right over in front of him, and he didn't get engaged. He just kind of and that's a great sign that he didn't start throwing his head and going crazy. And then another Bafford, who happened to be Rodriguez in that race, came in and just kind of pinned him in. So they had one in front, one on the side, and tried to take him around the track that way. He was just said, I'll back off. And then the other horses ran away from him, and it gave him space. He had gears. So we've not only seen him do it on the far turn when there was actually almost a physical altercation with another horse, but when the other horses tried to put him in a box, on the first turn of the San Felipe, he was able to decelerate, get his feet, and go around and just kind of go on and do his thing. It's not easy to do that in a 20-horse field, but you at least have to have the ability to do it. Most horses, they get their momentum stopped, they're done. We've seen it not only once in a very well-known instance with Barnes in the Santa Anita Derby, but if you go back and watch the beginning of the San Felipe, which was his really impressive eye-opening race, Same thing happened on the first turn. So I think that's really a feather in his cap. Umberto Rispoli's been in this situation a couple times. Now, it's different when you're facing fields of 4 rivals, 5-horse fields, than the 19 potentially that he could face in the Kentucky Derby. But I like journalism as well for those reasons. I mean, he has had 4 straight route wins since they've stretched him out around 2 turns. He hasn't been beaten. He's got the best brisk late pace figures consistently in this field. I know Final Gambit got a huge one in winning last time out at Turfway with the highest brisk late pace figure for the American horses there. But when you look at consistency, over 100 brisk late pace figures, one after another, after another, after another. I can't remember, Scott, maybe just the 4 straight route wins coming into the Kentucky Derby. I can't remember a horse with 4 straight route wins coming into the Kentucky Derby, much less them being 3 major graded stakes and getting 4 100-plus brisk late pace figures in 4 consecutive wins coming into the Kentucky Derby. This might be unprecedented ground. I have not gone back and looked through all the past performances to confirm that, but I've been doing my scouting report for 20 years, and I've been doing research on the Derby every bit that long or not longer. I can't remember a horse with that kind of resume. If somebody knows one, put it in the comments section as you listen to the podcast, and maybe we can look it up, or you can correct me on that. But it's a really phenomenal realm that he's in coming into the Derby. All that said, the favorite hasn't won the Derby since Justify in 2018. Favorites, had a nice run for, the 2000s to 2010 kind of era, through Justify in 2018. If you want to beat the favorite, I'm not going to talk anybody off of him.
That's exactly the way I feel. I generally am that guy that's looking. Well, I'm always that guy. I'm looking for reasons to not like the favorite. That's our job, in my opinion. Not only as analysts and content creators, but even more so as horse players. That's the first thing you should try to do. And I've just, I mean, I didn't jump on him. I wasn't on this horse as early as you. You have the right to brag, but I've been on him for a good bit now. And when you start riding a horse and they give you no reasons to sway your opinion, it's just not worth trying to get. I think he's a cut above this field, and I think with a clean trip, he's going to show that absolutely. But it's the Derby, like you said. The favorites don't win all the time, and there's plenty of other high talented horses in this field.
Had he worked average in his 2 works since the Santa Anita Derby, I'd be picking against him.
Yeah.
But he has been above average, which says he's just as good as he was. I was worried that maybe he hit a crescendo and maybe the Santa Anita Derby wasn't as good as the San Felipe, because the San Felipe to the eye was that was California Chrome like. His San Felipe was kind of like what we saw with California Chrome when he had that bust out effort in open company. It wasn't the same wow factor in the Santa Anita Derby, but it was a high respect factor for what he overcame. So I was willing to kind of go another direction if he didn't work well. But he has worked so well that it looks like he is as good as the paper looks. And if he is, he's probably the winner of this race with any kind of trip at all. Let's talk about some alternatives in here. Who do you want to go to? Throw a name out there that you want to talk about a little bit here.
Well, I mean, should we go to the to me the most likeliest underneath? We'll go with Sovereignty, to me, who I wouldn't recommend playing a cold exacta, or this isn't the best bet, best use underneath from the gambling perspective, but I think he is the next likeliest to put in a serious run in the Derby. And I think if the race plays out like we expect, which is a fast pace, and then journalism doesn't fire, I think he becomes the likeliest winner by maybe a little bit of a significant margin. The question, is, can he get back to that Fountain of Youth race, depending on what the number you're looking at? On Third Graph, he paired his races. That's a great sign, quality sign. On Briz, I'm looking at now, he regressed. I think he had it a little bit more his way in the Fountain of Youth. And I think with the pace, he is almost certain to put in a run. It's just, how much of a run it will be.
He won the Street Sense over this track at Churchill, and that's talked about a lot. But people who follow Churchill year round, though, the track in the fall and the track in Derby week are not the same thing. In the fall, they're always worried about freezing overnight. The track's a lot looser and cuppier during the fall meet. Not as much water added to the track as we see on Derby week. Not only do you get the Mother Nature factor of a lot more rain in the spring in Kentucky than we see in October and November there, but the track maintenance crew is going to tighten this track up on Kentucky Derby Day. So the track on the first Saturday in May is not the same track as Churchill is, say, in the fall meet when this horse won in late October in the street sense. But winning over the track never hurts. I don't think it's a major feather in your cap when it's fall to spring at Churchill, like it might be in different times. If you won in the spring at Keeneland, you're back in the spring at Keeneland. I like the horse for course thing. But I think the track at Churchill is vastly different in the fall than it is in the spring. So it is a home game for him, and I think that's positive, right? Because he's been there before. He's been stabled there for a long time in the past. He's back up from Florida. He's back in familiar surroundings. He's used to training there. So there is an advantage to being at home. But I wouldn't just look at the one race that he ran over the track at Churchill Downs and say, that's the reason you like Sovereignty. You got to have other reasons you like. But I think that's a factor in the handicapping. But if you like another horse, say Sovereignty beat that horse in the fall, right? There was 3 of them that came out of that race in the street sense. You had Tistastic, Sandman in there. If you said, well, he beat these horses over that track in the fall, he'll do it again. It's going to be a little bit different track. And maybe Tistastic or Sandman will like the Churchill spring track a little bit better than the Churchill fall track. So I wouldn't take that as a direct line on your handicapping thinking, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of home cooking and a little home field advantage. These surroundings are different too. There weren't all the tents. There wasn't everything and all the hullabaloo going on. And 160,000 drunks weren't there also for the street sense stakes. But, Sovereignty is definitely a horse that you have to respect for the 1.25 miles. There's nothing about his running style or pedigree or trainer that makes you think that the distance is going to be too much for him. He looks like a logical contender, but like you said, probably the second choice. Let's talk about the Bafferts in here. Let's Citizen Bull, Rodriguez. Citizen Bull's got the 1. Rodriguez has the 4. We go back to the field to let people see where those two are going to break amongst what looks to be a pretty speedy clump to the inside. Wouldn't you say, Mr. Shapiro? I mean, other than Final Gambit, you could argue the first 6 all maybe do their best running towards the front. The 6 in Meyer Daytona went right to the front in the UAE Derby. I don't think he's American speed, but we've seen international horses actually make the lead in 2 recent editions of the Kentucky Derby. I don't think he'll be as fast as some of those others, but there's no question the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 5, they can all cook.
They certainly can, and I think seeing that, kind of ensured those of us that wanted the fast pace that we should get it in here. You add Owen Almighty to the far outside into the mix, and maybe that heats in East Avenue, that heats it up even more. Back to the Bafferts, Citizen Bull's a horse that I think we both have agreed, was kind of a little bit dressed up, or maybe more than a little bit, with his easy wire-to-wire wins, both in the Breeders' Cup and then in his first race back in the Robert B. Lewis. Was exposed maybe in the Santa Anita Derby. He's been, working fast, and people seem to be flocking to him or flocking hard against. I'm in the against camp. I think he's going to have to send aggressively from the inside. I think he, might go a lot faster than anybody wants him to if he's asked and he breaks well with the potential runoff. And then that means Rodriguez, you got to ask yourself, has this horse ever been able to prove that he can win without an easy lead? When he's had those easy leads, he's been dominant. When he hasn't, he seems a little bit less like an alpha than some of his stable mates. But, when you listen to Baffert talk about him, he talks about how he's coming into his own at the right time, kind of like Authentic did even a little bit later with the September Derby. But the trip to me is concerned. Mike Smith, Hall of Fame rider, a lot of tremendous rides. But he also has gotten caught up or been a part of setting very, very fast paces in the Derby in the past. Obviously, Palace Malice comes to mind.
Yeah.
The Clifford Sice horse from the Danzig Candy as well.
Danzig Candy, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I just think this is a horse that's going to go, and the only chance he really has is if he's going to make the lead himself.
Baffert took this one out of Southern California to kind of free things up for Citizen Bull and for Barnes in the Santa Anita Derby. He hasn't had a lot of success on the road this year. The Baffert road game, look, you think about Gaming got beat short price at Oaklawn. Matticat Road got beat short price at Oaklawn. Cornucopian got beat short price at Oaklawn. Matticat Road went to Florida for a second road trip, got beat, ran fourth in the Florida Derby. Rodriguez is the only roadie to come through with a victory, and you could argue the Wood, with all its historical, pains since 2003, not having but one horse finishing the Derby money in the last 22 years, the Wood was the easiest field. So if Baffert couldn't win the Wood with one of his roadies, which race is he going to win? You could kind of look at it that way. But Rodriguez was visually impressive. All discredit aside to maybe the level of competition, what I saw visually in the Wood Memorial was good. And it was good on the clock. So that much we know about Rodriguez. Still questions, like you said. Can he take heat? Can he be the one who, fluffs off the competition and pulls a war emblem, like Baffert winning towards the front end, Medina Spirit on the front end. Medina Spirit wasn't a world beater going into the Kentucky Derby, but ran the race of his life. Authentic, the sire of Rodriguez, as you've already mentioned, same kind of thing, not a world beater going into there. He wasn't even the best horse in Southern California at the time. Honor AP beat him in the Santa Anita Derby and kind of the better of the 2 3-year-olds. But once they got to the September Derby, Authentic ran, just a cracker from one of the far outside posts that day. Rodriguez has to run one of those races to win. He's got to come back and run Medina Spirit. We know how the Medina Spirit asterisk turned out, right? So do we get 2015 to 2021 Baffert? Do we get 2002 Baffert with War Emblem? Or do we get that gap from 2003 to 2015 Baffert, where 12 years, no luck in the Derby at all, and only one Triple Crown win in those 12 years with Looking at Lucky? Bob Baffert's back. We just don't know what version of his horses we're going to get.
Exactly. And I think that is, people do forget about that gap between, his first run with Silver Charm, Real Quiet War Emblem, and then, the run of a lifetime that you spoke about earlier. But the interesting part about it is with these horses is, both of them, you could argue, have had races that have been orchestrated for them at Santa Anita. And I think people are maybe making some assumptions here that maybe Bob can do things that are not possible in the Kentucky Derby. You can't orchestrate anything just by holding back one of these horses. And I think you hear him speaking to the point, whether it really happens or not, he knows he's got to get out of the gate with these horses. Neither of them has any chance with any other running style.
I know nobody plays with a fullback anymore, but for our older football fans out there, and you're racing fans, so you're older, we get it. Rodriguez was the fullback. He was the blocking back for Citizen Bull in that race against journalism. He was the one trying to hem in journalism in the San Felipe. He was the blocking back. He was not the preferred star, I mean, he was... he was Kenny King blocking for Marcus Allen back in the day. It wasn't the star was supposed to be Citizen Bull. Now Rodriguez is just because of the race in New York. Was it Fool's Gold beating a weaker field? Or has he just really risen to the point that he's absolutely on go? He is trained very well. Cannot complain whatsoever how Rodriguez is trained. He tipped his hand prior to the Wood because he had outworked Barnes in the morning to the point where they were working Barnes in the dark so people wouldn't see it. So Rodriguez was getting good at the right time. Maybe he is developing, but you've got to get a price on Rodriguez. I can't take a single-digit number on him if you like him. I think there's enough question marks, and with this race scenario with the different speeds all down to the inside, I think if you take anybody in that first 5 or 6, you have got to get a double-digit price because whatever job they had before just got harder with the post draw. So I would be against Rodriguez unless you got a big overlay number, and you probably won't, right? What do you think Rodriguez goes at post time?
10 to 12.
Mike's got him at 12. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe a little bit lower, but Baeza getting in the field or not getting in the field is going to be a big deal to those mid-priced horses because he's going to take a little bit of money.
And the thing is I think I was a little bit surprised by the attention Citizen Bull is getting. I thought it would mainly go to the Baffert barn, would go to Rodriguez exclusively, and that hasn't been the case. So that could inflate his price a tiny bit. That's probably the only way I see that happening.
Citizen Bull's been training around with his neck bowed and kind of showing off and strutting, and he's kind of become the morning whisper horse, because of that, I think. But you know what? Horses look good on the track. Horses look good in the paddock. They look good with their neck bowed. What do they look like at the 8th pole? That's the question, right? That's when they're at maximum stress. And the question with Citizen Bull, since even back when going into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and the reason this horse was 16-1 for Bob Baffert in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was nobody thought he could run that far. And so as good as he looks working 5/8 in the morning, as good as he looks in a 2-minute lick galloping, I'm sure he looks that good. We've seen it on video. There's no disputing how good he looks. How good does he look, though, when they hit the 8th pole in the Kentucky Derby? Is he completely spent and he's got his card? He's thrown his card up on the desk and he's checking out of the hotel at that point. I mean, he's just done. At the 8th pole. I can't see him finishing the deal here, but he is kind of a horse I've got a little bit of interest Preakness-wise, like we talked about for the Preakness future wager. We'll see how it turns out with the Bafferts in there. Anybody else Derby-wise we want to talk about here before we wrap things up? Burnham Square has trained well, but maybe too well. Is that possible? But this horse is a horse who I think is going to be a little bit too geeked up. He is really training like a horse who wants to get after it and get going. I think we've got some Burnham Square footage here. We'll just go to this. Just watch how he breaks off in this workout. First off, you're looking at a horse who closed from off the pace to win the Bluegrass Stakes. He closed from off the pace to win the Holy Bull. And he's working 59-1. Look how he wants to get into this work. This is not a horse and when he gallops in the morning, he's got his head completely like back to his chin and just or his chin all the way back to his chest. And Scott, I fear this horse is going to be too much of himself on Kentucky Derby Day. I know people like these works because they're flashing, they look good. If Baffert's working like this, if it's a speed horse working like this, I don't mind it at all. Burnham Square working like this, to me, I'm worried about it.
Yeah, I kind of thought going into the Bluegrass, I liked him in that race. I thought that was his, the race was setting up for him to put his best on. And maybe he's showing signs in the morning that he's going to be a little bit over the top, to your point. So he's a hard horse if you're playing supers and tries to just outright toss because he's inconsistent. You're going to get a good ride or at least a good effort from Brian Hernandez Jr. with a plan to get to the inside. Yeah, I too am not as bullish on him now.
And he is working. Don't want to interrupt you here, but while the video is still up, he is working about 4 inches from the rail here. That's not by mistake, right? I mean, like you said, Brian Hernandez is going to try to get an inside run with this horse at some point if he can, and he worked him that way. So he's getting him used to it.
And it might not. And to your point, if he's headstrong, if he's too eager, that might not be the trip you want, to settle him down, right? So
right, well, exactly right. There'll probably be 3 horses outside of you. If you're 6th or 7th down the backstretch on the inside, there's probably going to be 3 horses outside of you.
Right. Well, I mean, I think he's going to be a horse that I probably use 4th, and probably that's it because I think using him with journalism, and already probably using sovereignty, you're beginning to get a little bit too much like the public. The 2 horses that I'm most interested in, I'd say. That will separate from the public. And I'm going to let you talk about another one that I'm using for sure. I know you will want to, but I'm East Avenue and Publisher. And I think both of them, different running styles, kind of like the underneath horses I have in the Oaks with Ballerina d'Oro and Simply Joking. One a speed horse, one that'll take advantage, maybe if not. I don't think East Avenue will be sent aggressively like he was in the Bluegrass. I think they wanted to get something out of that race and they got out the speed to their inside. Whether he is able with the blinkers on for the second time and basically a horse that has shown he needs the lead, be able to relax and finish enough to hit the board remains to be seen. But the price, I think, is going to definitely be worth it. I don't hear any buzz for this horse who at one point was one of the Derby favorites and was the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Yeah. And then Publisher, to me, very tough to make the case that he's going to win. And I really, for the sake of the quality of the race, I don't want a maiden to win the Derby. But I do think he's going to run a good race. Talked about it a lot, but when Steve took his son off to go to Flavian Pratt in Arkansas, I thought that showed that he thought the horse was moving forward. He's shown that in its running. The blinkers on last time. I think he's got a big shot to just come with a late run and pick off a lot of horses at what should be a big price.
Long shots in the Derby, tries, and supers typically are your late runners, right? And so, that's where people are going to fish around. I thought Flying Gambit, as Jeff mentioned earlier at the top of the podcast, is an interesting one from off the pace. Like Jeff, I have no idea whether or not he's going to handle dirt in his face, and he is going to get caked in dirt from post number 3. I wish Flying Gambit was farther out, but I do like what I see on video. I do like his late pace figures. I like the way he's trained. I wish Brad Cox would have worked him inside of runners and behind runners in his works. Instead, he put him next to his workmates on the outside, so he didn't get much seasoning out of those workouts. But he's fit. He's a strong finisher. If he takes a dirt, we don't know. Maybe he'll take to it just fine. That's the X factor. And you wouldn't bet Final Gambit at a short price. But the fact that he could be 25, 30 to 1, I don't think he's going to play 30 to 1 in the exotic show, because I hear a lot of people talking about him similar to the way Jeff and I are talking about him, that I think he's going to be a horse who's used a lot third and fourth in tries and supers. So, he's not going to play like an 8 to 1, like Baeza or somebody like that, or Rodriguez, but he's not going to play like some of the other prices. The other big price that I do think will play like a big number is a Chunk of Gold. I think he's got a shot. We've seen the Risen Star Stakes, not the Louisiana Derby's had a try super finisher the last 3 years, but it's been like the last 6 years that the horse has been in the try out of the Risen Star, the mile and an eighth prep, the next to last race on that Fairground series. And when you think about the mile and an eighth final preps, the mile and 3/16 is the Louisiana Derby, but the one that's kind of apples to apples to the other final preps is the mile and an eighth of the Risen Star. And that race has had a very good success rate of throwing horses forward and running well in the Kentucky Derby. He ran really well in that race. That was the race where Magnitude ran off like a freak and won by a mile. But the second place finisher in there was Chunk of Gold. He saved every inch of ground in there, skimmed the rail under Loveberry. And I called this out in the podcast the other day. The horses who come up the rail and surprise you and run big races in the Kentucky Derby were all given a don't give a damn ride, right? Calvin Burrell, Sonny Leone, Brian Hernandez last year. You need a cowboy down there. You don't need some guy who drives a Mercedes to the track and gets valet parking and has already made $5 million. Those guys don't ride like that, And for the Derby, I think Loveberry, as good as a ride as he gave to Phil's a couple years ago, I think he could give a don't give a damn ride on Chunk of Gold and say, we're going to get through here. We're going to get through here. And a lot of times those horses do get through, and at least he'll give his horse every chance to save every bit of ground. I don't think Chunk of Gold's one of the 4 or 5 best horses in the Kentucky Derby, but if he's one of those at 47 to 1 that clunks along for third or fourth, I won't be surprised. And I think if he does it, he'll never be more than a couple paths off the rail, even though he's starting way on the outside. I wish he would have drawn a little bit closer to the fence, because if they want to save ground with Chunk of Gold, they got a long ass way to go to get there, Scott, starting from the 19, barring any scratches. But he's interesting to me, and I don't think they're going to touch him, even in the deep exotics. He's not going to get bet like Final Gambit. There'll be a lot more Final Gambits in the bottom of tries and supers than Chunk of Golds.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Chunk of Gold will get overlooked. The post will certainly help that as well. Those outside horses, people know that it'll be a little bit of a tougher task to find that rail and grind along. I think, the horses that I think will take the most money from an underneath perspective out of the big prices, Final Gambit, Grande, I think will be amongst those as well. But and a lot of this is going to depend on if Baeza gets in, and if so, who comes out.
Right. Again, scratch time for the Kentucky Derby will be 9 a.m. on Friday. And I'm trying to do, as we talk here over the graphic, if there are any updated scratches or any big breaking news before we close out this podcast here. I don't see anything that is sending us off of any particular horses at this point, but stand by is how we always have to couch it when it comes to the Kentucky Derby. For all the latest information and the stats and trends, the handicapping analysis, all the picks, the first bet artificial intelligence selections, workout videos, race replays. Scott analyzes all the prep races with those replays. Be sure to check out the first Kentucky Derby wager guide, available free access to anyone. You don't have to be an account holder, but we'd sure love you to be betting this weekend with First Bet and Xpressbet. I want to remind you, with First Bet and Xpressbet, we've got a $20,000 exactathon this weekend. So if you can pick your exactas in number over Friday and Saturday, you could earn your share of up to $20,000 in additional prizes. So be sure to play this weekend with First Bet and Xpressbet. Scott, let's wrap things up. I said 45 minutes or so at the top of the show. Anybody who bet the over is laughing to the bank about 30 minutes ago. So let's wrap this thing up. I'm going to give you the final word. Jeff got the first word on the podcast. You get the last.
All right, I'll take it as an honor. Appreciate it. And fun conversation. Time flew compared to what we thought we were going to spend, because it was hopefully great conversation. Hopefully we can lead some people to some winners on amongst the biggest days, and obviously in the biggest race of the year in America. Best of luck to everybody out there. The one piece of advice on wagering, if you can try to not spread as much as you think you should, there's a lot of serial spreading going on days like this. If you can hit a compact ticket a couple of times, it goes a long way. And you're probably, even in chalky situations, going to get paid more than you would in most situations.
Good luck, everybody. Kentucky Oaks Friday, Kentucky Derby 151 this Saturday.